Hi, everyone. Good morning. And my fellow Asia 21 leaders, and of course, our distinguished board and chair, Jack Wadsworth, Tom from New York City, and of course, Margaret and Sanjeev, all great leaders, fearless leaders from Asia society. I think many of you already know me. My name, once again, is Chuck Ng. I'm an investor and entrepreneur, as well as the head of the UC Berkeley Alumni Association for China. We're very honored to have our first woman in the history of UC Berkeley to serve as Dean of College of Engineering, Professor Tsu-Jae King Liu. Yes, yes. Which many of you guys have heard me talking about. And as a matter of fact, Berkeley's just celebrated our 150 years anniversary last year. So 150 years, never had a female dean. And so another round of applause, right, for our female dean, yes.
Thank you very much.
So Dean King Liu is a distinguished engineering researcher and has 96 patents already established under her belt, and then more than another 80 additional patents pending. Yes. Give her a round of applause. Come on, I mean, come on. This is individually. I've never had a person that I know personally has more than one, like that many pens. So yeah. And she's best well known for co-inventing FinFET transistor, and was recently included in the National Academy of Inventors and also the Silicon Valley Engineering Hall of Fame. On this note, she's also the reason why Moore's Law could continue its trajectory. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about Moore's Law, or for that matter, Intel. Raise your hand if you have heard of Moore's Law and Intel. Raise your hand. Yeah, that's everybody, I should. I'm expecting everybody. Yes. So, but before I go into sort of the scientific questions, I want to start with a question, by the way, that I asked my friend, Andrew Yang, which is the first Asian American presidential candidate, which I hosted him earlier in the year. So I want to start with the question that I asked Andrew, which is, Dean King Liu, did you ever imagine while growing up that you would become the first female dean of the best engineering school in the US? No doubt, How did you get to where you are today?
Okay, I'm not sure if people are laughing because it's Berkeley, the best engineering school in the U.S. But before I answer, I wanted to just express my appreciation for this opportunity to meet with all of you and to have a discussion and to share my experiences. Certainly, I never imagined that one day I would become the first female engineering dean anywhere, and even more so UC Berkeley, because I knew UC Berkeley is really like the top public university in the world, top in engineering, and especially in electrical engineering, computer sciences, which is my field. I knew it was very competitive. I really never imagined that I could even be a professor at a top university like Berkeley. So the second half of your question is, how did I manage to get here? Well, I think I had a lot of good fortune, to be honest. I've always been surrounded, fortunately, by people who were high achievers. So my parents each went to graduate school. They had high expectations for their children, and I was the firstborn. So I think Asians, the firstborn, usually the parents have set the highest expectations, and then I think they go down with the subsequent. So a lot of pressure, and I guess I never really imagined too far ahead what I would be doing in my life, but I always knew that I enjoyed challenges, and I just enjoyed overcoming challenges at every stage of my life, and I think I just somehow luckily ended up where I am today, because I wanted to, I just seek out challenge, and I enjoy overcoming them, but also working together with people, helping others achieve more than they could ever imagine. So not only myself, but it's a lot of satisfaction helping others. So from when I was young, tutoring or teaching, and becoming a professor, just helping students, develop and to reach their career goals or achieve beyond their goals. I think that kind of mindset to always be learning and always helping others to bring out the best in others. I think that's how I ended up where I am today. In terms of my latest role right now as Dean of the College of Engineering, I think society, we haven't reached our full potential collectively or individually if we don't have full inclusion of all the talent that's available in our society, and just motivating, inspiring the next generation of leaders to pursue engineering as a field of study, not necessarily as a career, because I think engineers, we need more of them in all professions, including in government, in business, and in medicine, and so on. So I think I didn't plan in advance, but I think step by step, hopefully people can see some of the qualities that led me to where I am today.
That's great. Actually, that's a good answer, because I did ask Andrew Yang, say, hey, Andrew, have you ever thought about really running for the US presidency? He said, of course not. But he said, I actually had Tiger Mom, and who are graduates of UC Berkeley. Not surprised. His dad is a PhD from Berkeley, and his younger brother also got a degree from Berkeley, except himself. So that's why like he said, I'm surrounded by tiger parents. But anyways, but certainly I think that there's always high expectations. Let me ask, like, who's the first, the oldest in the family? Raise your hand if you're the oldest in the family. Wow, very good. We have a pretty, like half, I can see half of you, like more than half, wow. So you know exactly what Dean King Liu gone through. I'm seeing being the oldest in the family. Very good. Well, sort of on the industry front, can you refresh us again the importance of Moore's Law, and how has it made the digital revolution possible today and created such great companies in the heart of Silicon Valley? Of course, Intel, Apple, Google, Facebook, where Silicon Valley is leading the world.
Sure. So Moore is Gordon Moore, who actually is an alumnus of UC Berkeley, College of Chemistry. And he is the co-founder of Intel. And he observed, this before he co-founded Intel, he observed in the 60s, early 70s, 60s, that if you look at the pace of technological advancement of the semiconductor industry, it was just interesting. If the number of components on an integrated circuit chip, a single substrate, was doubling every year. So this is an exponential pace of improvement. And he realized that the reason for this is not because people wanted to make better devices necessarily, but actually lower cost to make integrated circuits more affordable. And so with steady advancement in the manufacturing precision for integrated circuits, we can actually make these components smaller. These components are mainly transistors. And if you can make transistors smaller, that means you can pack more of them together, higher density on a single substrate. And it turns out that when you do that, you actually improve the transistor performance, you improve therefore the circuit performance, and you lower the cost per transistor or per component, because now you can have a chip that's smaller and you can fit more of these chips on a single substrate that's processed through the manufacturing line at the same time. So it's lower cost per chip. Or you can actually have a chip of the same size but more functionality. So today's computer chips actually have functionality of entire computers back decades ago. So I think Moore's Law really just set the pace of continued advancement. Over a period of about 50 years, we've been able to increase the density of the transistors with every new generation of manufacturing technology. And that has led to exponential improvements in the performance of computing devices, but also cost affordability. And this is why we've seen the proliferation of electronic devices, computing devices all around the world. So that's led to the emergence of the Internet of Things, where you have smart devices that are wirelessly, communicating with each other, and also cloud computing, right? That you have access to high-performance computing for these devices. And together, this has enabled the collection and processing of large amounts of data about the world. And so this confluence of the Internet of Things, cloud computing, and big data has enabled really the AI, artificial intelligence revolution that we're seeing, which will transform dramatically the way that not only the way that we live and work, but also the way that people run governments and run businesses. So it's really profound implications or potential impact both positive and negative on our global society.
Very good. Well, so on top of what you just discussed, you're an expert in semiconductor, which we just learned, and over 100 patents, and very hot topic, as a matter of fact, in Asia and China. Where do you see the future of semiconductor, and why FinFET, your invention, has such big impact in the IT industry and our future?
Okay, so the FinFET is just referring to a transistor design that was developed at Berkeley. And it's basically a three-dimensional transistor structure that provides. So when you make transistors smaller and smaller, they become less ideal in their performance, because a transistor fundamentally just acts as an on-off switch. Right? You need to apply electric potential called a voltage to control if it's going to conduct current, electric current, or not. And when you make the transistor too small, it becomes difficult to turn it off properly. It'll just become leaky. An analogy is often used of water flow, like in a water hose. If you want to pinch the water hose or press on the water hose to prevent water from flowing, it's easier if you actually pinch from both sides rather than one side if the water's flowing really fast. So the FinFET just sort of analogously allows you to wrap the controlling electrode, controlling voltage around the channel of semiconductor that's conducting current. And so this has enabled the transistor to be shrunken, to be smaller and smaller, to towards 10 nanometers. So 20 years ago, the industry didn't have any idea how it was going to make transistors smaller than about 30 or 40 nanometers. And so that's why we did research at Berkeley to pave a technological pathway for Moore's Law to continue, starting at the beginning of this decade, but well into the next decade, this current decade, to enable this exponential pace of performance improvement.
And do you see that, I think there are actually some questions about, Moore's Law. It's going to end one day, and do you see that?
Okay, so people have been predicting the end of Moore's Law for decades, including Moore himself, and usually it's always about 10 years away. The end of Moore's Law is always 10 years away. And I can say that, looking at the technology roadmap for the industry, I say it's still at least 10 years away, the end of Moore's Law.
So, it's not going to end anytime soon. So,
I have to explain. Well, I know you're no longer students, but for the students today, they say, "Wow, there's a roadmap and it ends in 10 or 15 years. So this must not be a good industry for me, because students expect that they will have more than 10 years of a career." But there's really no other industry in the world that sets a roadmap that predicts things so far in advance. So you have to put that in context. And the reason originally why the roadmap was developed is so that the entire industry, all facets of the industry, so the people who develop the manufacturing tools, the people who develop the software, they can sort of plan in advance. Okay, in 10 years, we're going to need a tool that can define things at 10 nanometers. So we better work now to prepare. So basically, it's helped to synchronize different parts of the semiconductor ecosystem, so that to ensure this cadence, this rapid cadence of progress. And so it's not, and of course you can't really predict very accurately more than 10 years from now, so why waste your time trying to map out something more than 10 years in great detail? So that's the reason why it's always about 10 years that you can maximum predict.
So in other words, you guys should all come to Silicon Valley, because we have many more years of technology innovations that's still happening here. Anyways, changing to a topic that I'm also personally very passionate about, which is on education, and coming back to a place where Dean King Liu, you started your wonderful research and academic career at UC Berkeley. You, of course, is a graduate of Stanford, but it's just shh. No. No, but
how many people here were educated at Stanford?
Pretty good number. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
How about Berkeley?
Hey, that's even. That's pretty even. Look at us. It's pretty even. And Jack should raise his hand, because Jack's granddaughter, Riley, is a mechanical engineer going through her last year at UC Berkeley as well. So yes, there you go. Now, hey, with you, I think we outnumber the Stanford grads. But anyways, but obviously you understand both the university very well. And And in Berkeley, we actually rank second in number of Nobel Prize winners in the U.S. after Harvard, by the way. And there's actually another number in your sector, which is even more impressive. There is, in terms of number of alumni who won the Turing Award. How many of you guys heard of the Turing Award? Raise your hand if you heard. Raise your hand. The Turing Award. Alan Turing, which is from Cambridge, by the way. He's actually invented the Turing Award, which is, I think, a good number of you, which is the Nobel Prize for Computer Science, right? And in terms of that award, the Turing Award, Berkeley has the most number of alumni globally in the world that has won more Turing Awards than anybody else. Well, that is the reason why, we said that in engineering, Berkeley is leading in this space. So I guess my question is, Dean King Liu, you've been in Berkeley so many years. Why is Berkeley as a public institution? All the top 10 universities are all private except Berkeley. Why is Berkeley given, still, as a public university, so innovative?
Okay, so it all stems from the outstanding faculty. But, as a public institution, our mission fundamentally is to serve the better, basically serve society, right? To serve the benefit of our society, which today is a globally interconnected society. And so people who come to Berkeley, faculty or students, know that we have this fundamental mission. So that is a shared goal, right? And so that helps to create this ethos of collaboration and thinking, more beyond your own success, but collectively, how can we work best to have greatest impact in the world? So I think fundamentally the fact that we're a public institution helps to foster collaboration, which I think actually accelerates innovation, right? If people are accustomed to working in their own groups, excelling in their own field of specialty, but they're not encouraged or supported to collaborate, to innovate together, then the pace of progress, of course, will be, and the creativity of their innovations will be less. So that's one big factor, I think. It's just the quality of the people and the shared mission, and that drives innovation, collaboration. So I think that. So this is why I think diversity is also important now. That in the future, engineered devices, systems, and processes, we're all going to become more and more dependent on them. And so it's really important that we have a very inclusive approach, a culture in engineering, to make sure that those systems that we innovate in the future are truly going to promote the well-being of all members of society, rather than promoting, division and inequities.
That's interesting, because there's a recent stat that I've seen that they did a survey of startups from the universities. Of course, no surprises, Berkeley and Stanford were the top two schools. And then interestingly enough, it actually said that, so Stanford, with less companies, raised more money, whereas Berkeley ranked first in terms of number of startups, but raised less money. Now, statistically, you guys are all big data guys. What that means is the use, and we're talking about as investors, you return on the money that you use, the efficiency in terms of money that you use. So I'm saying is, because we're a public institution, this is what Dean King Liu said, we are a better, efficient use of capital. And that's important as an investor, okay? And for those investors out there, you're thinking of investing in companies, think about Berkeley that way, okay? More efficient use of capital. What do you think?
It is true. We do, certainly the faculty do more with less. We educate more students than private peers in institutions. We're forced to do that. But actually it develops, grit, right? And a lot of the talent in the students as well as the faculty. And I think that actually is key to the success of our graduates after they leave the campus.
Thank you. It's great. Obviously, as I mentioned, given there's so many distinguished faculty members, how hard is it to work with so many distinguished colleagues? And what does leadership mean to you and your priorities as a Dean of College of Engineering?
Okay, so actually at Berkeley, as I said, it's a strong tradition of collaboration and serving the greater good. So it actually is not as difficult. In my job, I have the pleasure of meeting with other engineering deans from across the UC system, across the Pac-12 conference, across the nation, and we compare our experiences. And after those meetings, I always feel that I'm very fortunate because I think at Berkeley we do have star faculty, but they actually some of them, yeah, you have to stroke their ego, but they still work together while they want to work together and collaborate and educate and inspire the next generation of researchers and leaders. So actually, it's not so hard, relatively speaking, because we have that shared vision and the goal. What was the other?
Leadership, like what does leadership mean for you and your priorities?
So I think I like the word empowerment. So I view my role, because we have such outstanding people, so I was very fortunate, at another institution, the challenges would be different. It's really just a matter of really bringing out the best in others. So everybody has great potential. We want to empower them by training them, giving them the skills and experience so that they can succeed to the best of their, to their fullest potential. And so that's, I think, the key is just to, if you're working with outstanding people, is to just find the best way to bring out the best in all of them, so collectively you reach your full potential.
And your priorities?
My priorities right now at Berkeley is to continue to attract and retain the best faculty. And also, we want to do more and more to support our students' success. So in the past, Berkeley had a reputation of being a place where students really just survive, and then that builds great character and in terms and skills. But we also want more and more so students to feel like they can thrive at Berkeley. And this is really important because in engineering, it's not necessarily traditionally a friendly culture for women and people from underrepresented minority groups. And the attitude of really helping each other succeed rather than sink or swim, just so that when you succeed here, you will go on and do great things. No, we should really try to foster a more supportive culture in engineering.
It's great. That's great. And then, I guess my last question, and then of course I have other questions from I want to get the questions from the other audience. My last question right now is, and actually this is kind of speaking from experience. The reason why, for those of you guys, who've seen me yesterday, I didn't really dress like in black. Today I dress in black. Why? Because actually I have the good fortune of traveling with the dean. And so whenever I travel, I've been given by the dean's husband, David's title, that I'm her personal bodyguard when I travel. So that's why I dress in black, right? Just to make sure that I look like a bodyguard, But I really have the good fortune of traveling with the dean internationally for a number of occasions. And really curious about what is College of Engineering doing in terms of global collaborations, and how can some of the leaders and the companies that our current Asia 21 leaders represent can work with Berkeley and support the great work that you do at UC Berkeley.
Okay, so Berkeley, yes, we actually have Berkeley Engineering has a number of major collaborations with international institutions around the world. I'll just mention a couple of them here. In Singapore, we have the Engineering Alliance for Research in Singapore. Now in Singapore, the focus there, the research primarily is looking at technologies to really improve the energy efficiency, the usage of energy for buildings. So you might know that most of the electricity used in the United States and in other parts of the world, modern world, is used in buildings, right? For lighting, like we have more than enough lighting here for controlling the temperature. And a lot of that electricity is wasted, right? Like the temperature is not right. We have the air conditioning on too strong in the summertime, and maybe the heat on too high. And when we leave the room, we forget to turn off the lights. So we can use the technologies, right, Internet of Things, to really monitor the occupancy, the activity in a room, and adjust the lighting and the temperature this research, okay, like if we turn on a fan, maybe that allows us to have the temperature of the room go up a little bit, and that saves in air conditioning costs. So this is the kind of research that is going on in collaboration with researchers in Singapore. It's a tropical area, and they'd like to really reduce the the energy footprint of Singapore. And of course, in the United States, it would benefit us as well if we can reduce our carbon footprint. In another type of collaboration is with the Philippines, with universities in the Philippines, which is maybe it's still a developing area. We're collaborating with faculty to really train them so that they can train their students there to be more, I guess, to gain skills and competency in modern technologies, in information technologies included, to really raise up the quality of living in their country. Now in China, Chuck has accompanied me on many trips in China, which is wonderful. We have a collaboration with the Tsinghua University, which is based in Beijing, but they have a major effort developing in Shenzhen. And the municipality of Shenzhen has really invested a lot of resources to support this collaboration called Tsinghua Berkeley Shenzhen Institute. And we do research there, primarily access to resources for our faculty that aren't available at Berkeley. Just one example of a research project that has come out of TBSI is a collaboration to look at ways to improve, to use AI somehow, artificial intelligence, to improve the efficiency of construction. So, this is not AI is a sensitive topic, but applying, digital technologies to improve the efficiency with which we construct new buildings, so reduce the waste, reduce the time, therefore reduce the cost. This is something that's beneficial not only for U.S., but also China, of course. Rapidly, this urbanization occurring all across the world. So we try to focus on research that isn't too controversial, but will be beneficial with great impact. Because the measure of the excellence of an engineering school or college is really the impact, the positive impact that it has on society. So these are examples. And with regard to how the alumni can participate or help, Chuck has come up with a great model where today it's actually becoming difficult for our faculty to do research overseas or in collaboration with people in China, or to get funding for research in China. So we, at least for now, have to be careful. And so we're maybe focusing on helping developing regions of China develop curriculum, right, to train future engineers, because there's not enough engineers in the world to meet all the demand. So that's relatively safe. We offer courses to students in China similarly to the courses that we teach at Berkeley. So it's like all public, right, nothing proprietary. But to incentivize the local governments to provide funding to Berkeley, to help us teach our students at Berkeley, but also to implement these programs. We work with alumni. The alumni who are free to start companies or to move their company operations to these regions that have resources. And so it's mutually beneficial because the alumni can gain extra resources from municipal governments to support their success in China, while we actually help to train the workforce for those companies, but at the same time bring cash back to Berkeley, because you might know the state of California really hasn't been increasing our level of funding, even though they've increased the number of students that we have to teach. And we have to find ways like this to bring extra money to really just support the teaching assistants and the faculty and the staff needed to teach our students. And also, I think by teaching students overseas, our faculty have ideas for improving the curriculum, and that benefits Berkeley students. So it's win-win-win. It's like 4 wins, okay? Win-win-win-win for this kind of a collaboration, which has been, I think, innovative. First, I've heard of this kind of international collaboration involving alumni, as key partners. So, I have to thank Chuck for that, and I look forward to growing this partnership model with, hopefully, with many of you, if you like.
Yeah. So as you said, actually, I meant what I said, which is yesterday. I said in the past I've actually invested in Berkeley as well as Stanford alum companies. But I'm certainly hoping that, because there's a number of you who are entrepreneurs, and certainly through the Asia Society Network, I really hope to, and of course enabling, working in partnership with great technologists and scientists, say, at Berkeley. I really hope that we can, develop this ecosystem. So perhaps that we can all invest in each other's companies and make each other more successful as shareholders, right? Not just as Asia 21 colleagues, but sort of that whole ecosystem could develop. So it's something to think about. But also, I wanted to also, Dean, when we actually had dinner with you and our Stanford president, John Hennessy, I did invite him, and you were part of that witness, that I did invite John Hennessy to participate. Unfortunately, John couldn't make it. As I mentioned, John was former president of Stanford and current chairman of Alphabet. Unfortunately, he sent his regrets. But we had a good dinner with John. And John is my goal, also, and with the help of everybody, my goal is to also, as a leader here at Berkeley, is to not only, for the dean to be a successful dean of College of Engineering, which of course is the most important college at Berkeley. No question. You can laugh on that, but certainly that's out of check, of course. But I mean, that is the most, because by definition, the College of Engineering raised the most money at Berkeley. So money speaks, right? And we actually do have, as I said, Intel, we have like Tesla co-founder, Apple co-founder, all College of Engineering grads, right? And so those are very important parameters. So on that front, I really am very happy and excited that we have such a rare occasion to have such a distinguished leader from Berkeley and also a scientist. So that being said, I actually have asked a few of my colleagues to actually think about some questions, and then while the others, I have a few questions that a few of you, my colleagues, I've asked to kind of ask the dean, but for the rest of you, this is make it very interactive. We're doing well, and we're doing fantastic in terms of time for 20 minutes. So I think on each of the questions, we have like about 5 questions that I asked some of you, 5 or 6 questions to think about beforehand, and then the rest of you, let's make it interactive and really kind of ask questions, any questions that you want to ask. But let me start with my friend, Marianne. And if you could, please introduce yourself, because each of you are very distinguished as an Asia 21 representative. Introduce yourself and then ask your question, please. Mariam, please.
Thank you, Chuck. Hi, my name is Mariam. I'm from Qatar. I work in communications at the Qatar Fund for Development. I'm an ex-jockey, and I write children's books as well.
You ride camels?
No, horses. There's no camel jockeys. That's illegal. Yeah, that stopped 2 decades ago. Yes. Well, thank you for being here this morning. We've learned a great deal from you. And what I would like to know is, as a leader, and especially as a woman, you must have faced a lot of challenges and difficulties. I would like to know what are the most challenges that you faced as an engineer, as someone in your career, but also as a woman, because I always think there are special challenges that we face as women leaders. What are they? How did you overcome them? And what is the biggest lesson that you've learned? Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Miriam, for the great question. Thank you very much. So, looking back on how I got to where I am today, I actually don't feel that there were so many barriers, mainly, and I wonder why, and I think it's really because I've been somehow fortunate, well, we can talk about this later, to surround myself with people who actually set higher expectations for me than I did for myself. So I think that's, so not only surrounding yourself with people who believe in you for whatever reason, and who will support you in achieving the next step in your journey, your career journey. I think that's been what I have benefited from. Now, I had a question also from young leaders like yourselves, like, why is that? Because you can ask for people to help mentor you or to serve as your advocate, but how do you get people to say yes? through that. So I actually never explicitly asked people to mentor or advocate for me. But I think my general attitude is to be helping others. Right? I do derive satisfaction from helping others. That's always been something since I was young. And I think when people that helps to foster engender like people who want to help you, right? Because they know that somehow by helping you, eventually they will benefit. Well, and actually, human nature, we do get some reward, in our brains, right? Happiness from helping others. So I think that's the key, is to really be not always looking out for yourself, but looking out to help others, and the others will be more inclined to help you succeed. And I've certainly benefited a lot, I think, in every stage of my life from people around me.
Very good. Well, next question goes to Megan. And please.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask, my name's Meg. I'm a reporter with BuzzFeed News. I wanted to ask a question. There's been a lot of discussion in the U.S. recently, mostly from a national security perspective, about this idea of decoupling and sort of separating supply chains between the U.S. and China. I'm curious about your thoughts on this and what it means for your thinking about the future of Intel and other companies that are like Intel.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So certainly within Intel, every company has to plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? Advocate continually with the leaders of our country for keeping the international relations, maintaining those, because since we live in a globally networked society, most companies today, the biggest companies, are international, right? They have operations around the globe. So within Intel specifically, we definitely have operations in different parts of the world, not only in China. And so fortunately, it seems that even if we were cut off completely from supply and manufacturing operations in China, we would still be able to manage. But I think ultimately everybody realizes that there's benefit of having talent from all around the world. It just leads to better products and just makes business sense. So I think Intel is like, of course, you have to be defensive, plan for the worst, but continually trying to advocate with legislators and with people in the White House directly, like just stressing the importance of international collaboration, because it really, our country has benefited. If you look at the leaders in the semiconductor industry, all the inventions, all the innovations, I'd say the majority of them would not have been possible without teams of engineers that included people who immigrated to the U.S. And I think it's really not in the best interest of our country to attract and educate the best and brightest future leaders of the world. Like at Berkeley, we do have, I think it's well over 10% undergraduates who are international students, but at the graduate level, in engineering, it's over 50%. And it would be a shame to educate them and then force them to leave our country. Most of them actually want to stay in our country and contribute. And even if they eventually go back to their home country, we have benefited tremendously from their talent and innovation.
Yeah, on that front, by the way, your fellow Intel board member, Omar, sends his regards to you. He was,
Just saw him 2 days ago.
Yep. And then, and I know that personally, Dean King Liu and have worked to help with some of the students who actually, like, for instance, they're applying for distinguished status that help them to stay in the U.S., including, one of our, a mentee of mine, which is a distinguished researcher at Google, for instance, who kind of done many things in Bluetooth. So I know on firsthand, and I personally really agree with the fact that, really, I think there's a saying that first, to give, then to receive, right? Really kind of give things and help people. And then, of course, you will have multiple in return in terms of receiving help from others.
Maybe I can expound. So what I've come to realize in my leadership positions in engineering and now the College of Engineering is that I think as engineers, most of us, like myself, introverted, really went into engineering because we didn't necessarily enjoy dealing with a lot of people directly. But this means that we haven't really developed the skills or the inclination to communicate with the ordinary people, right? So if people actually, but then I've had the chance to talk with the people on Capitol Hill. It's like, and most of them don't have a technical background. So we actually have to learn to communicate what we do and the importance of what we do more effectively to the general public. And so this is one of the things we're trying to include in our education of engineering students, is to encourage them to go out and become socially engaged and effective communicators. Because if we don't tell our story, then how can you blame the leaders of our world for making the decisions that are not in the best interest? So with regard to international students who come or people who emigrate from other countries, we need to highlight their contributions, like the leaders of many of our companies today, right? Like Microsoft, like NVIDIA, and so on. I mean, they basically are Asian, right? Like, why don't we highlight these leaders? I mean, I think Asians, maybe at least Chinese, we tend to have been brought up to be more humble, was not bragging, but at least take credit for your contributions. I think we need to increase the visibility of Asian leaders.
Yep.
Otherwise, people will have the impression, they're just the silent minority, and they're just doing great things. But why is it important? Why is it important to ensure that we continue to welcome them and include them?
Right. So we have 3 more questions, but I want to make it allow other people to ask more questions. Mia is next. Mia, but Dean, if you could limit your answer to 1 minute, so that we can actually, because there are many more questions. We have Mia and then Jason, and then Shuri here, and then many hands raising up. Please.
Sure. I'm Mia and live in Washington, D.C. and work for the U.S. government. Thank you so much for being with us here today. As mentioned, yesterday we heard from your fellow Intel board member and Medtronic CEO, Omar Ishrak. And he talked with us about the importance of setting goals and having that be a key component to being a successful leader, to navigating challenges and ups and downs in the short term. And so I want to ask you how you set your own personal goals and work to achieve them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mia. So Chuck told me in advance. So see, I'm going to keep my answer short, but I have it written down. So this is because I was going to quote somebody else. So there's an American philosopher and poet, Ralph Waldo Emerson. I thought he captured this principle well. He wrote that the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, and to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. So, ultimately, I think each of our individual success in life is measured by the impact that you have on others in your local community and on society as a whole. And this is one of the reasons I chose engineering, because I knew it could have positive impact. So basically, I think my advice is to find a higher purpose for yourself, for your life, and to set realistic short-term and long-term goals that will motivate you and guide you to achieve to fulfill that higher purpose. And you align your priorities, which influence your day-to-day decisions with your goals. And don't be discouraged if you don't see results from your efforts immediately. A lot of times, it takes a lot of time for you to achieve your goal. So perseverance, trying and learning from failure especially. I think that the theme for research and for entrepreneurship is learning how to learn from failures, right? So that's kind of my general advice, is finding a higher purpose than yourself and aligning your short-term and long-term goals.
Very good. Jason. Who's a Berkeley alum, by the way?
Yes.
Just Jason, please.
Hi, Dean. Thank you so much for making your time and for making your points. Really enjoyed this conversation. My question is pretty straightforward, but I'm curious to hear from you. How, as Dean, do you look to educate and cultivate student leaders for the next generation? What are your goals for that?
Okay, so thank you for that question. As I alluded to earlier, I think for engineering students, really developing basically EQ, so emotional, social skills, I think that's really something that hasn't been emphasized in the past, but must be, because we do need to collaborate, even in innovating future technologies. We need to collaborate with the humanists, as well as the artists, which we've already been doing for quite some time, social scientists. Because looking at examples, simple examples of like the impact of social media on modern life, so not only the way that children are developing today, but just the way that it's influencing what people believe, right? And therefore influencing their behavior, and it's not necessarily always in the best interest of society. So I think that's the most important thing that we're trying to cultivate now in engineering students is skills and comfort to interact with people outside of engineering.
Sure, right here. And then I see their hands. What? Somebody give her the mic.
Hi, my name is Shiori Ito. I'm a journalist, and thank you so much for being here. And who you are, you're such an amazing role model for all of us. I've been fighting sexism in Japan, and I was wondering, I mean, who you are is already empowering, but how can we empower more women, in especially engineering, education, and workplace for women?
Great, thank you for that great question. So I think tied to what I said before about visibility, so there are people, women as well as men, but women who have made significant contributions in their technical fields, right? Like this recently, the people who contributed to the Apollo, mission, right? Hidden figures, right? I mean, just telling their stories, just so that girls and boys, when they're growing up, don't think it's unusual for women to be able to contribute in a technical field. So first of all, it's just increasing visibility of people's contributions. It's not necessarily bragging about them. It's just giving them credit for what they have already done. And then also training the majority, so the men, cultivating an appreciation, like what are the benefits of having a more diverse team? And I think faculty as well as students have told me, our meetings, our discussions are different when there are like more women in the room, right? It's not like one person dominating the discussion all the time. Now, like people feel more comfortable speaking up. So I think if we highlight more the benefits, so first of all, it's supporting the success of women who want to pursue careers, technical careers in engineering and so on, in science. So not discouraging them, but supporting them. And then also recognizing the value that they bring, right? That you end up with more innovative, more creative solutions to pressing problems for our society. So I think it's not only about increasing resilience and perseverance in the females in our field, but also increasing awareness of bias and empowering the men to be supportive and not feel like it diminishes them, and also empowering them to speak up when they see some bias or discrimination occurring. Because a lot of times these microaggressions, they add up and they end up discouraging women. And we see it happen all the time, but we don't know what to say to make it a learning moment for the aggressor. And so we're trying to teach people how to be effective bystanders, right? To intervene when they see something that actually could have unintended negative consequences. Because a lot of times the aggressors don't know. They might say something like, "Oh, congratulations, you got selected for this award. It's because you're a woman," or something like that. I mean, they didn't necessarily mean it negative way, but it has a negative impact on the woman, right? That you only got it because of your gender rather than because of your accomplishment. So what do you say in that moment to this person without offending them, but just increasing their awareness that it actually has a negative impact, unintended, on the person that you're trying to congratulate?
Well said. Actually, Omar made a similar comment, by the way, yesterday, that being a minority, not just woman, but certainly he mentioned about being a board member and whatnot, and also just on those occasions. So that's why, by the way, I invited him. I say, hey, would you consider serving on the board of Berkeley Engineering? He's thinking, so actually, I kind of told him, you should think about that, Omar.
Invite him then.
You should invite. But anyways, let's do this. Let's do 3 questions at one time, because that's what I've learned from yesterday. Tom was very efficient in terms of the 3 questions. So 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of you in the front, and then we'll have but please ask your question. I'll take notes.
Nico Ngaropo from New Zealand. My question is a technical one, actually. So with your background in patents, and especially in, in chip manufacturing. What is your take on the impact that quantum computing will have in today's society, and what do you see coming?
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks very much for your time to talk to us. I'm from China. I'm an entrepreneur with business in China and India. And I'm feeling a little bit embarrassing to ask you a question because Berkeley and Stanford is booming around here. But I never thought of going to college because I was raised in a village, and my parents grow rice still in my hometown. So I never thought of this kind of thing, but I made it because there's sponsorship from the U.S. government. And but currently, it seems that like the exchange program between China and U.S. derailed. So what do you think of their future of their such program? Thanks very much.
Thank you for sharing your morning with us. My name is John Mack. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm a social entrepreneur. So I'm interested in questions of how we can innovate our political system, how we can revamp democracy, etc. One of the, in your introductory remarks, a particular comment caught my attention. You mentioned you would like to see more engineers working in governments. And it just reminded me of an article in The Economist from around 10 years ago, which compared the political leadership of China and the US, where 8 of the 9 Politburo leaders of China were from STEM backgrounds, whereas in the US, half of Congress is made up of lawyers. And you have talked a lot about the need for cross-sector sort of collaboration, people in STEM going into the public sector, and I presume vice versa, philosophers, social scientists ought to come into the STEM community. My question here is, the public sector and the STEM sector or the private sector or academia have very different incentive schemes. If you work in governments, you are less likely to be able to accumulate or to hold patents, for example, because you're working on different sets of challenges. So, in your opinion, how can we encourage more such cross-sector collaboration, sort of going from one field to another?
So why don't you start with this question first, and then U.S.-China education impact, and then quantum. But go ahead.
Okay, last in, first out. Okay. Well, we have example with Andrew Yang, right? I mean, I think engineering people in STEM can. Okay, first of all, there's a trend of longer careers, right? The average lifetime is increasing. The pace of acceleration of technology is increasing, so people actually can succeed more rapidly in business. And so now, after when they're still in their 40s, they can actually have a second career, and maybe. And maybe that's something we should not balk at. Like there are a lot of skills you gain with not only from an engineering background, but being a successful entrepreneur or business person. And I think that we have some experience. I mean, example, I think a business background, a more solid intellectual background, technical background, I think can only help. Right, because in engineering you learn all kinds of skills that translate to success working with others in teams to achieve a common goal. So I think in the future the world leaders are going to have to work together collaboratively rather than against each other to really for the benefit of our global society, because things like global warming, climate change, those are not problems localized to certain regions of the world. What happens in China affects the climate that we experience here. And we need to cultivate leaders who can see that we actually are all part of a single world, and we need to work together.
Right. So is U.S.-China tensions creating issues on the education front?
Yeah, so that's a good point. In California, it's interesting. We have so many outstanding high school graduates that we're getting pressure from the state of California to reduce the number of out-of-state students, and that includes international students. So as a consequence, we're actually trying to actively increase the opportunities for our students to study abroad, because part of the education is to be exposed to develop multicultural or intercultural competency. And you can get that if there are a lot of people from all parts of the world here at Berkeley with whom you can learn. But if that number goes down, we need to be more proactive to send our students overseas to gain experience. So we are steadily trying to increase the number of opportunities for students to go abroad to study. The fundamental challenge is that we need to ensure that the students can still make good progress towards the degree requirements, so that engineering courses taught, let's say in China, the professors at Berkeley will accept them as substitutes for the course at Berkeley they would have taken, so then the students can still graduate on time. And that's what we've been working in close partnership, for example, with Tsinghua University to what we call articulate our courses, have our faculty approve certain courses that students can take in English at Tsinghua, so that they can go there and experience, Beijing and not only the university but the companies and just the culture. So this actually earlier this week, the chair of the Electrical Engineering Computer Sciences Department was just at Tsinghua University on Monday, signing a memorandum of understanding. And we are going to send the first students next semester from Berkeley to Tsinghua to take courses, engineering courses in English there for credit, transfer credit to Berkeley.
Wow, I'm very happy to help that to hear that, because I make the introduction and we finally actually have this perfect impact on quantum computing.
Yeah, quantum computing is the impact. It's hard to say. I think when I talk with the chip designers at Intel, they aren't really worried about it ever replacing or disrupting the roadmap, the product roadmap. But I think quantum computing, people recognize it has tremendous potential for certain types of calculations, but it's not great for general purpose computing. And so I think it will be complementary. It can actually speed up and certain types of computations like encryption and so on, or factoring of prime numbers or something. But in terms of just ordinary everyday computing, like in our personal devices, in the Internet of Things, I don't think it's going to have that much impact. And also quantum computing devices, depending on the technology, they require like millikelvin temperatures of nearly zero absolute temperature to operate. So clearly they're going to have to be made available really through the cloud, right? Some companies are going to have to maintain these quantum computing systems and give people access to them, like through the wireless network.
Okay. Actually, Steph, I forgot to mention your fellow Stanford alum, which of course we love the Stanford side because Berkeley is great because of Stanford. Right, Steph, there question there, and then I see a question, and then three females. Yes, 3 guys, 3 females. Please, Steph.
Thanks, Chuck. My name is Stephanie C. I run a data science company in the Philippines, so I've met some people who've gone through the Berkeley instructor program. Thanks for that. That's been pretty great. So how can we lure more Berkeley engineering graduates into starting high-tech companies in Asia?
Okay, and then right there.
Hi, thanks very much for the really interesting conversation. I'm Zen from Malaysia. I live in the UK, and I'm a fantasy novelist. My question is quite a big one. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. As someone from a multiracial, multi-religious, multilingual country living in a multiracial, multi-religious, multilingual country now, one thing that I really struggle with is the tension between diversity, inclusion, which are themes you were talking about, and the kind of inherent challenges of that, by which I mean, you were talking also about pulling together for the greater good, but what happens when you have very different groups of people working together is that you also have wildly different value frameworks and worldviews, and consequently different conceptions of the greater good. So, for example, like you mentioned, climate change, obviously there are powerful lobbies who do not believe that climate change are an issue. And I suppose my question is, how do you come across that in your work and your life, and how do you deal with that tension?
Right there. Another fellow Stanford alum. All right, right there. Yes.
Hello. Hi, Dean. Thank you so much for your really insightful comments. I'm Suhani from Mumbai, India. I'm currently in grad school, so I think what I have to say here is a little bit inspired from the sort of experiences I've been having with the teaching. And I feel that I think the more and more I'm learning about how the grad field and academia is working is that it's very research incentive driven. And we might be compromising a little bit on the teaching quality of professors coming in, if they are star professors in research, but not necessarily in teaching. And I've been pretty surprised to see that in some of the top schools, and that's sort of forms as a basis for a lot of the inspiration for what the students really want to do. And people are dissuaded from doing things they might want to do just because they're not being taught that well. So wanted to understand, as the dean of the School of Engineering, how are you sort of trying to balance the teaching quality with the research quality and the incentives of the college?
Okay. She, by the way, it's a John Hennessy scholar. So I'll let John know, actually. It's a very, very, okay, please.
Should I answer in reverse order again?
First order, it's easier, right?
Okay, so quality of education. Actually, at UC Berkeley, it's, okay, I'm being cynical, but because we are, like 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't much tuition, right? It was relatively low. So, you know, students couldn't really complain that the quality of teaching is not the best. But now, since we're charging a real amount of tuition, actually over the last several years, more than a decade, actually, we've been steadily increasing expectations. When we hire new faculty now, we do expect them to care about the quality of teaching. And not everybody is a great teacher, but everybody can improve. And so we do have a center for teaching and learning, and where faculty can actually go and get help to improve their teaching based on student feedback. So teaching quality, if it's poor, it can actually impede somebody from moving up the ladder. It might not get them fired, but they will not move up the ladder and get salary increases. So that happened like within the last 20 years. And now the same thing is happening. We want to hire faculty who actually have some understanding and have some track record or plans to increase diversity and foster inclusion, equity and inclusion. So that's the next wave. So hopefully within the next 10 years, it'll be like a standard expectation of faculty to be excellent in research, education, and advocates for equity and inclusion.
Well, on that front, because the second question was, how do you handle a multicultural, racial kind of society, and what's your experience of that?
So I think the key here is this is part of the exercise for faculty and for engineering students, is to cultivate empathy, right? So people they come from different, they have different perspectives because of their different life experiences. And that's the culture, as well as other things, and education and so on. So I think we need to cultivate, not only altruism, which is one thing I mentioned before, but also empathy. There's one of the great things about Berkeley is that it has excellence in all fields of human endeavor. So I always like to tell people about the Greater Good Science Center. So it's a psychology professor that started this center. And so there's social science research that shows what are the habits or the behaviors that foster, individual and collective, well-being. And so one of them is empathy. So people come from different backgrounds, but we want to train students to be able to hear different opinions without feeling like they're getting threatened or getting upset. We want to cultivate resilience, but also empathy, so that you can understand why people believe or feel the way they do, right? So it's one thing to have different feelings, different beliefs, but you want to understand why. Where are they coming from? If we can cultivate empathy in our future leaders, then hopefully there'll be hope for our society. We don't have to agree, right? But we want to cultivate respect, mutual respect, and understanding for each other, so that we can together, coexist without destroying, the planet.
We have 1 more minute, and then we're going to answer the last question, and then we should take a quick photo too, perhaps after this with everybody. Okay, so the last question is, how do we actually, staff question was, how do we actually better prepare engineers, and more specifically, entrepreneurship, and then send them to Asia, I guess,
Oh, that's right, Asia. I think, so at Berkeley, we over the last decade, we actually have invested a lot to grow the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Chuck is on the board for SkyDeck, which is an incubator and accelerator. We have a 6-month program to accelerate the progress of startup companies, and we have incubators, just regular, over 100 startups, mostly students, who have access to like an entrepreneurship in residence, seminars, workshops to learn about, entrepreneurship. So through parts of our ecosystem, alumni can tap into that. You could actually come and give a talk, be an advisor to startups. And also, I think the key is just networking, right? Getting to know, having our students and our faculty getting to know you through these existing platforms that gather people together. And once you make the connections, then hopefully there will be opportunities for students with startups to go to other countries to commercialize their ideas.